Hey, X here. Let's talk about success for a minute. The keys to success are integrity, always learning.
What's up, everyone? This is Peter O'Coffer. Back again. We're doing episode 5 today, season 1. And the theme is embrace your weird. So I'm going to start off with a couple of good memes that will lead us into that. In case you haven't noticed, it's been a few weeks since I've done this. I know the rhythms of my life and how busy things can get and how crazy things can get. And it's been that way for a minute. So it's been a couple of weeks since I've done an episode, but I've been looking forward to this. And even though I'm only doing it now, I've been thinking about it for the last few weeks. So the first quote I want to talk about, I'm going to look back for a minute to the last episode dealing with being notorious. And this quote says, "Never trade respect for attention." And that really kind of sums up what I was trying to cover in that last episode, because that's essentially when you're being notorious, you are looking for attention. And we know branding is about patience and taking your time to build your reputation. The second meme is evolve and move away from the crowd, or you will end up like them. So that's the first meme, and that will really set the tone for this episode. The second meme, or end quote, "God gave you a fingerprint that no one else has, so you can leave an imprint that no one else can." So that's, think on that one. And then the final quote meme comes from Meryl Streep. "What makes you different or weird, that's your strength." And we know Meryl Streep is a legend, one of the greatest actresses in the history of film. Not just this era, but any era. So I'm starting off with those quotes to kind of set the tone for this episode. People try too hard to fit in this world today. People suppress interesting parts of themselves to be liked. We live in a pretty homogeneous world when it comes to personalities. Break the mold. Sprinkle in some spice. Don't be afraid to be different. Embrace your weirdness. It makes you stand out. It's what makes you memorable. So those are some of my own thoughts that I wanted to add, and then we'll go into some more specifics, and I'll give examples. Particularly, in the music world, kind of prepping you for season 2 at points during some of these episodes. But yeah, you want to be memorable. You want to stand out, and you have to break out of that high school mentality where everybody wants to be the fit in and be the kind of kid, and suppressing what makes them unique is interesting, because a lot of the bullying that goes on is you're different. You're not trying to be like me or everybody else, but that's kind of as you go along and become an adult and move professionally and have your goals, your uniqueness is what's going to set you apart and make you memorable. And if you're being unique, you're using the unique skills that God gave you to accomplish the task that you were sent here to do. So my first example of kind of someone embracing the weird is Andy Warhol. For years, I had a hard time understanding Andy's appeal. He's most famous for his silk screen. So he wasn't exactly a painter. He would do one, and he was the father of pop art, which essentially, I mean, Campbell's soup cans. I mean, we've all seen Campbell's soup cans, and it wasn't like he did anything fancy or interesting with a soup can. He just literally painted a soup can and basically did copies of it. So, so he kind of, he sort of really embraced the concept of prints. And when you saw him, he was odd looking. He kind of acted odd. I guess you'll have to go to YouTube and watch him, but he certainly was no alpha male or anything like that. But he did build a huge team around him in the late 60s in New York City. And he threw great parties. I mean, he quickly became known that if you wanted to go to the best party in New York City, Andy Warhol was the person. And then Andy was also very instrumental in putting together the rock band Velvet Underground. So Andy was doing multiple things in multiple genres, and it was kind of he embraced his oddness and was kind of unforgettable because of his oddness. The second that comes to mind, and again, I'm going to do a whole episode in season 2, David Bowie. And David used different personas during the 70s. I mean, he literally would transform himself into another person. And his most famous one was Ziggy Stardust. And Ziggy was from Mars, and he had red spiky hair, and he did a whole concept album around this whole persona of Ziggy. And, he had other personas after Ziggy. They weren't as pronounced as Ziggy because, I've studied Bowie pretty carefully, a couple of biographies, and he kind of started losing the boundary between who he was and who Ziggy was. So he did do, later as the 70s went along, Ziggy was early 70s, he did other personas, but he never took the deep dive into these other personas like he did for Ziggy. But he became, known not just for his music, and sometimes, I think in retrospect, maybe Ziggy even overshadowed the music for that album, even though there were some great songs in that album. But through this whole process of his personas, he kind of turned fashion into art, and not many people have done that since. I think Billy Porter's done that. Lady Gaga's turned fashion into art. A lot of artists try to do that, but he was the first to really this is just beyond clothes. I mean, there's a message here and everything. So that's kind of, but David Bowie definitely embraced as weird. Another example would be Alice Cooper. And Alice, in the early 70s, he kind of mixed rock music with horror and vaudeville. So he had a whole stage act where he, boa constrictors and baby dolls and, chickens, I think, at some point. So, fake blood. He did all this kind of stuff. And then out of Alice Cooper, he kind of influenced the stage show and the live concerts for another great 70s rock band, Kiss. And Kiss kind of combined rock and roll with masks in the form of face paint and literally the 4th of July, because, Kiss was known for their explosions during their concert. So, I mean, taking a bit of weirdness and marrying it to someone else, and then you get an unforgettable experience. Two more folks that were very adept at embracing their weird, and it worked well for them, at least, first of all, is Prince. And Prince, married androgyny. There's a famous meme there on Facebook where they talk about Prince as the only man who could, wear lipstick, makeup, an earring, high heels, and still your woman. But he embraced a lot of feminine traits in clothing and stuff like that, but was also very masculine, in his lyrics at times as well, and on stage. Um, and he also, Prince would throw many different music styles together, and Prince was not afraid to have at least some of his music sound weird. And so that was kind of a contrast to some of his more commercial pop stuff, and it gave people, those deep cuts. That's where you really get committed fans, because you're not always, um, trying to appeal to the masses and trying to get to hits. And of course, a little mundane stuff. His Color Purple, and then there was the Prince would use dualities and the opposites, particularly with religion and sexuality. Michael Jackson's another one that embraced as weird, and it worked for a while. I love Prince. He's probably my all-time favorite artist. On the duo, obviously, I think in season 3, a whole episode on Prince alone, and on the do Michael as well. But Michael embraced. Early on, when he blew up in the early 80s, the whole Barnum and Bailey's quote, "There is no such thing as bad publicity." So he married, his silver glove and his sparkle socks with Bubbles the chimp and the buying elephants man's bones and Wonderland and all this stuff. And it got attention. And eventually the question is, did it get too much attention? Did it overshadow his artistry? I know it's touched on, again, season 3, I'll probably do a whole branding episode on Michael alone. But towards the end of this season, when branding goes wrong, we'll touch on Michael again. And again, I respect, Michael as an artist. I love his work. I'm not going to get in, to all the legal aspects of the allegations of him and minors and all that stuff. That's not my place. I'm not a lawyer, but I'm going to focus on the branding. But eventually, particularly in England, his the tabloids dubbed him Wacko Jacko, because I think he went too far in embracing the weird. Closer to home in this time, we have Lady Gaga, and Lady Gaga kind of mixes some of the things that David Bowie did and some of the fashion and looks that Grace Jones did back in the late 70s and early 80s. And then she sprinkles in a little Madonna as well. And then, keeping it closer to home and closer to these times, you got Post Malone. And Post Malone, of course, how many people before Post Malone put tattoos on their face? I mean, Mike Tyson did it after he retired from boxing. But, it's interesting. I mean, Post Malone kind of bet on himself for that. He's like, I'm going all in to be a rock star, and, at least that's my take on that. And I'm going to, first of all, he stood out because he had facial tattoos. And because it's not like, he can, go back and decide to work at IBM. I mean, if he shows up at a job interview at IBM with facial tattoos, you and I both know that's not going to go well. So, but that was part of his branding. That's part of his passion and part of his belief in himself. And everybody admires someone who will bet on himself like that. And that's what he did. So we all wear masks. We show some personality traits to some and hide them from others. So what weird aspects should you express? Well, I would say first to make sure that it doesn't hurt others. I mean, most of the examples I gave enhance the art of these musicians and artists. They don't detract. Does it increase your happiness or confidence? I mean, I think most of these folks, I mean, they wanted to be different. They were different, and they kind of reveled in being different. But again, they weren't putting anybody down. They weren't. It was enhancing the goal of their entertainment. does it make you more effective? Well, I mean, in Kiss's case, I mean, I think it certainly made him a better live act. David Bowie, his personas made him more interesting to watch, even outside of his music. Um, Prince, with all the things he did, all his weirdness made him more interesting, even between his albums as well. Does it help the in your purpose or achieving goals? And yes, I mean, again, that's kind of piggybacking on the last point. So as you get older, most people become more comfortable with who they are, and that's why oftentimes your parents seem to be weirder in their 50s and 60s, and when you were growing up, and that's why in some ways your grandparents are even weirder than you remember them as they age, because I mean you just get more comfortable with yourself and you're okay with those weird aspects of yourself. So how did I embrace my weirdness? Well, if you listen to my music, there's plenty of weird there. It was I like early funkadelic. Hendrix could get weird on the guitar. George Clinton with Parliament got weird through his whole career, and after Prince, P Funk is probably my second favorite when it comes to musicians. So I grew up listening to weird, and you kind of what you listen to, you kind of that comes out in your music. Over the years, and recently becoming a bigger Pink Floyd fan as well. And Pink Floyd can get kind of weird at times as well. I used to be offended, when people called me weird, but now I kind of look at it as a badge of honor. I used to spend a lot of time trying to explain myself to people so they would understand me, and it never worked. So I've gotten to the point where I'm not going to stop explaining myself and just be who I am. And if they don't get me, they don't get me. It's interesting. Growing up, I always felt like I was an outsider, and I actually have a unreleased song called The Outsider that's not completed, and now thinking about it, I should probably complete this song and throw it at the end of this, even though it's not completed, and that might be what I do, because I have not decided what song to throw at the end of this episode, but that might be a option. We'll see, because I like to wing it at some point, and that's what I'm doing now. But I grew up as the outsider, and then when I got to Purdue and became an activist, I was sort of not the outsider anymore. A lot of people knew me and whatnot, and then I worked odd jobs for a couple of years out of college, and then I came to Indianapolis and started working at the Indiana State House, and had the privilege of working for Bill Crawford, who, when he retired, was the longest serving African American state legislator in the history of America. And that was a big thing, and Bill was kind of a legend in the community, and Indianapolis has always been called a big small town. So I wasn't an outsider. I was kind of like, I wasn't a cool kid back in, middle school and high school, but I got to meet a lot of people, and for a while there I was the cool kid. But life throws you curveballs and you get knocked down, and I did get knocked down pretty bad a couple times, and realize that I was put here to be an outsider. A lot of my friends over the years are a mixture of, I guess you call them the cool kids, but outsiders as well, now as an adult. So I've kind of embraced, finally, after many years of being an outsider and seeing the benefits of being an outsider, because that's kind of like you think outside the box. You see things that others don't see as the outsider. So that's kind of my journey into how I embrace my weirdness. So yeah, it's an interesting ride, and I am glad I am where I am in my journey on this part of my brand now. And it took me a while to get here, but I'm glad I am where the weird person I am now. So, after further thought, I've decided to end this episode with a song off of my third album, Cyberfunk 2020. It is called The Reality Distortion Syndrome. And this is kind of an instrumental. It's kind of if Jimi Hendrix played synthesizer rather than guitar. So it is kind of weird, but it does have a message and it does convey something. As far as The Outsider goes, it's embedded in another work with other songs, and I'm just going to wait. I'm not really... The track is laid and the lyrics have been written, but I'm not dealing with those sets of songs yet. So eventually you will get to hear that one. All right, well, until next episode, have a good one.